Hey guys, what's going on? My name is Zenaton, and welcome to today's video for Legends of Runeterra. Today we got what's probably going to be a fairly long video. Today we are doing the rating video for the recent set, Magic Misadventures. If you are new to this series and have not seen any of the other previous videos I've done similar to these series, quick overview. We are going to go through every single new card that has been released. We're going to talk about the cards a little bit, and then we will give the card a rating based on its power level in constructed. So Expedition is not really in the discussion here for its rating. We will be using a 5-star rating system, no half stars, pretty standard rating system. 0 stars is this card's terrible, unplayable, meme level garbage, and 5 stars is these are the deck defining, meta defining cards that are super, super strong and most possibly are going to even get nerfed, in my opinion, or at least should at the very least get looked at in terms of nerfs if they become too strong. And then in between, it's like 1 star is like kind of unplayable with a little potential. 2 and 3 is like the middle of the pack stuff where I'd say the majority of cards fit in. It's like they're not that great, but they're solid, the bread and butter kind of cards. It's like they don't do anything too special, but they do a job and they do it well. And then 4 is like almost that like 5-star power level, but they fall short in some way or another. Real quick, I should also say, because this is a newer mechanic that I should talk about, these ratings are purely for whether you want to put the card in your deck or not. So, not for if it's just a good card. And what I mean by this is if the card is generated off of a card generator card like Conchologist or Telescope. What's a good example of a card like that? I'd say Shark Trainer. Shark Trainer is a pretty mediocre card, but getting a Shark Trainer from a Banal City Mayor or a Shellfolk is a pretty good deal, I'd say. But you most likely would not want to put it in your deck. And now before we get into the actual ratings, just one more quick note, quick disclaimer, if you will. These are just my personal opinions. Who knows? I could obviously be wrong. I could be right. I've been wrong in the past, and I will probably be wrong in this video as well. And my opinions do change as the meta starts to settle and more games are played. But these are, again, just my personal opinions. So don't take this as gospel about whether a card is broken and you should play it, or whether a card is trash and you should not play it. So let's go and look at the cards, and let's start with everyone's favorite new region, Vandal City. So we're not starting off too well here with Banal City, in all honesty. Starting off with multi-region card here, Arena Mecha Caster. 6 mana, 4/5, attack, give other attacking allies +2/+0 this round. Card is bad. It's just a Arena Battlecaster, but for a lot more mana for a slightly bigger buff. And it is technically bigger itself. It's a 4/5 instead of a 2/2. And it's also a Yordle that does kind of matter nowadays. Something being a Yordle does matter now because there is Yordle synergy, but this card is just bad. I have no idea any kind of deck that would want this. I feel like any kind of deck that would want this kind of buff would rather just play Arena Battlecaster anyway, so I think this card is just unplayable garbage. Pretty okay card to get off of Telescope, but like I said earlier, we're just talking about these cards by themselves, not considering how good they are from being generated. So I'm going to give it 0 stars. I don't think any single deck would actually want to put this card in their deck. Now then, next card up, another Yordle. Arena Promoter, 4 mana, 4/3 with Tough. To play the card, discard 1, manifest a Mecha Yordle, reduce that Mecha Yordle's cost by 1. Pretty okay card. Very, very slow card, though. I will say that. The discount is nice on the Mecha Yordle. And the Tough keyword, I think, saves this card. If this card was a 4 mana, 4/3 without Tough, I would not be the most impressed by this card. I think this card would be really, really bad. It's really slow. Kind of like very anti-tempo. 3 health's not that good for a 4-drop especially. It's not the worst, but you need a little bit more, I'd say. And Tough does help. Tough really saves the card. Maybe in the future, though, Mecha Yordles will have a little more synergy, but for now, I haven't been too impressed by Mecha Yordles. Gonna give it 2 stars, though. There aren't that many ways to create Mecha Yordles at the moment, and I do think this might be not the worst, but definitely on the worst end. The worser end, the lesser. Wow, my English is bad today. I think this is on the like lesser end of ways to create Mecha Yordles if you want to create Mecha Yordles. But there's only like I think 4 or so ways to create Mecha Yordles, so it's fine. And plus, with more and more Yordle synergy, it will get better and better. And I feel like that should just be attached to every single card that's a Yordle. With more Yordle synergy, every single Yordle gets a little bit better. Anyway, speaking about Mecha Yordles, Bilge Rat Rascal, 3 mana, 3/2. Play, discard 1, manifest a Mecha Yordle, give that Mecha Yordle Spell Shield. It's a permanent Spell Shield, so it's not for that turn only. There are things that give Spell Shield, but only for that turn. So this thing is giving a permanent Spell Shield. I like this card. Unlike Arena Promoter, this card is, well, it's a little bad for its cost, 3/2 for 3. It's kind of mad. You usually pay a 2 mana for a 3/2. I like it. First off, curves really well with Yordle Explorer, so that's nice. Little awkward if you're playing Draven, which you probably are because you want to discard stuff. Maybe in the future we'll be able to build discard without Noxus, like PNZ Banal City, instead of having to play Noxus for things like Lost Souls and Dravens, etc., etc. But I like this card. Pretty good. Unlike Arena Promoter, it comes out faster, so you're not losing as much tempo. The Spell Shield on the Mecha Yordle could be really, really nice. So I'm a big fan of this card. I like it. The only problem I have with it is a little understated. No keyword kind of sucks as well. Thankfully, you can block Fearsomes. And it is really slow. Like, the whole Mecha Yordle strategy is really slow outside of, say, Rumble, I would say. And the meta is really fast at the moment. So if the meta slows down, I think cards like this that generate Mecha Yordles will be a little bit better. But for now, it's just a little too slow. Still, though, I like the card a little bit more better than Arena Promoter. Fits in curves a little bit better than Arena Promoter, who's kind of fighting with the Twin Blade from Lost Soul for the 4 mana turn 4 play. So 3 stars for me, pretty solid. It's probably like one of the better ways to create Mecha Yordle, so I like it if you want to go that strat. Next up, though, what do we have? Cloud Stance. Pretty meh card, in all honesty. Card is also created from Gust Monk, but we're talking about just Cloud Stance here. Cloud Stance is a 1 mana burst speed spell. Give an ally +2/+0, and at the end of the round, recall it. Kind of sucks. I feel like the problem with this card is, while it's not bad, it's just you don't want to play it. It's not a high impact kind of card. Sure, it's 1 mana. Don't get me wrong. It's a 1 mana card. You can't expect too much from it. But you're using up a whole card slot just to put this in. You could, in theory, use it to push in more damage, but playing this card and then attacking for the +2/+0, you can put it on something like Quick Attack, I guess. You do open yourself up to getting 2 for 1. You play this, your opponent plays like Mystic Shot or whatever removal spell, and then they got rid of the unit and the Cloud Stance, and then you're really sad. So I'm not a fan of this card by itself. Gonna give it 1 star, though. There's some kind of like potential with it, but I'm not the biggest fan of it. Next up, we got Electro Harpoon. 2 mana slow spell. To play it, discard 1, deal 2 to a unit and 2 to the enemy nexus. I like this card. I don't think this card is that great, but I really, really like this card. 2 mana deal 2 is pretty good, as we've seen in Mystic Shot. Slow speed is holding this card back. I think this card is getting held back purely by the speed of the spell. But yeah, being able to deal 2 to a unit and then also deal 2 to the nexus, that's a nice little bit of chip damage. 2 mana to deal 2 is solid, as we've seen from Mystic Shot, as I already said already. And discarding is not really that much of a downside. It's sometimes even an upside with things like Fallen Riders and Lost Souls. And it's easy to get fodder anyway to discard stuff, so it's not if you are playing a card like Electro Harpoon, you've built your deck around discard most likely. So I like it. Pretty good removal for a Vandal City deck, like a nice small removal. They already have some like between Buster Shot. I think that's the Tristana champion spell that deals 3, I believe, and Pokey Stick, but it's just a nice little extra piece of removal that Vandal City has available to it now, so it's nice. And of course, another way to enable discard strategies outside of PNZ and Noxus is pretty sweet too. Gonna give it 2 stars though. I just don't think it's getting there yet. And the kind of deck I feel that would play a card like this, some kind of like discard, tempo-y, maybe even control-y deck, just doesn't get there at the moment, but I can see the potential. I can see a lot of potential with this. Pretty good card to get off of Conchologist, though, I will say that. Next up, oh, this card is trash. I don't even think I'm going to talk too much about this card. Ember Monk. 4 mana, 3/3 with quick attack. Summon another ally, grant me +1/+0. So, yeah, first off, it can just get chumped. So you can grow it as big as you want, and then your opponent chumps it. You can say like, oh, but you can use things like Ghost or something, or give it Overwhelm with Might or something. Sure, but you could do that with a lot of other cards instead. So obviously it's trying to be like, oh, this is definitely meant for like a recall synergy deck where you like bounce things back to your hand and then play them or something. You could also maybe consider using it with blade dances and stuff, but even then it just feels so meh. I feel like there's just so much better payoff if you're trying to spam and flood the board, whether by just playing a lot of units and recalling your units and playing them again, or, you know, blade dancing. And 3 health is not a lot of health for a 4-drop. I said this earlier with the Arena Promoter. It's really, really easy to kill. If a 4-mana unit with 3 health is really easy to kill, and this doesn't have tough like the Arena Promoter. So I'm not a fan of this card. I could see like some kind of weird OTK possibly, but I'm not a big fan of it. I honestly think it's just memes. And I feel like any kind of like weird OTK combo that you could come up with would just be better with different cards anyway that are similar to this. So for the moment, I think it's just unplayable and you should never consider putting this in your deck. Oh, and another card that's pretty bad. Fix 'em Uppers. Now, unlike Ember Monk, I think this is bad mostly because I think there are better 2-drops than this. So what does it do? 2 mana, 1/2. First time you discard a card or damage the enemy nexus, grant me +2/+1. So it becomes a 3/3. The cute thing is you can make it a 3/3 during combat by using like a burst speed way, or I guess a fast speed way to discard, say like, I don't know, like a Draven Spinning Axe or a Rummage or whatever. And that's pretty cute, but that's like a very awkward line of play for not that big of a payoff. And you kind of have to do it every single time. Like, if this was a 1-drop, this would be crazy good. But for 2-drops, I think anything in Banal City, first off, you definitely are going to only play this in some kind of Banal City discard deck, right? Because sure, it doesn't need to have you discard a card to activate it. You can just damage the enemy nexus, but you're probably going to put this in your discard decks. I feel like there are so many other 2-drops you'd rather be playing than Fix 'em Uppers. And that's why I think this card is bad. Not because it's a bad card, but because there's so many other cards you'd rather play. Maybe if you're not in those regions, I guess you could play Fix 'em Uppers if you're trying to do some like weird shenanigans, like, I don't know, like some weird Vandal City Targun discard, but then I'd rather just play like Mountain Goat or something, because Mountain Goat would give me gems to discard. But yeah, like, for example, Fallen Riders, Boom Baboons, Telescopes, Conchologist, Yordle Explorers, all good 2-drops I'd much rather play than this. And again, I know it's meant to be for discard, but I'm not the biggest fan of it. I think it's really unplayable bad. So I'm going to give it 0 stars. I just think, again, I've said it numerous times, I think there are just so many better 2-drops than Fix 'em Uppers. So 0 stars for me. Next up, what do we have? Flame Spitter. 2 mana burst speed spell. Grant an ally +2/+0 and impact. Permanent buff. And you can arguably look at it as a 2 mana +3 damage. And it is permanent. So if your opponent can't kill the unit you buffed right away, and you get another attack, that's huge, but yeah, I don't know. I do think it does have a home, and that's like some weird Bandle City like aggro deck that's maybe playing elusives. It kind of reminds me of Brothers Bond, and Brothers Bond, while it doesn't really see play anymore, it did see some play. You would be like, you would attack in with your Noxus aggro deck, your opponent would not block like a Spiderling or something, and you'd Brothers Bond it, and you're like, okay, cool, the Spiderling's now a real threat. So use Flame Spitter on something that's not blocked or maybe an elusive, and then it's a scary threat. So I like it. Like a lot of buff spells, always opens yourself up to getting 2 for 1. You play this on like, I don't know, a 2-1 or something, and then it's now a 4-1 with impact, and then your opponent plays Vile Feast, and you're really, really sad. Still though, I do think there are decks that like this card, just very, very niche. And I feel like I'd rather just play Pokey Sticks and stuff, or some other kind of like reach or aggressive spell anyway, compared to whatever my secondary region is. So I'm gonna give it 1 star. I think there is a little potential here in a very aggressive Vandal City deck. I just think there's most likely there has to just be better stuff than this. Like, I don't know, Twin Disciplines or Troll Chance or Sharp Sights or whatever. Anyway though, next card up. Grumble Slug. 2-mana 2/3 with a tune. Multi-region card, Banal City, and Bilgewater. Very, very boring card. Boring doesn't mean bad, though. In fact, a lot of cards that are good and strong are kind of boring. So you can probably guess already what I'm going to give this card as a rating. Not that great. Doesn't really do much. Solid stat line. The attune is annoying. Pretty good as well in the Bandle Tree decks. Comes down. The 2/3 stat line's a pretty decent stat line for a Bandle Tree deck. Kind of hard to remove this card in the early game. The attune's nice, so you can hold up spells as well, threaten things like group shots as well while still curving out. Pretty nice card. But just boring. It doesn't do much on its own. Probably going to be hard to remove early on, so it's most likely going to fit really, really well with the Poppy curve, so it'll get buffed with Poppy and then become like a 3/4 or something, so that's nice. But it's kind of just not doing too much on its own, but it's a solid card in the Bandle Tree deck, and maybe in the future it might even have more decks, but for Bandle Tree alone, it's pretty good. Gonna give it 2 stars for now. Kind of mediocre as a top deck though. After you've played 1, it kind of sucks for like copies 2 and 3, because you're mostly just playing it to check off the the Bilgewater mark on your Bandle Tree, so it's not that great after the first one, but it's still okay. Next up, what do we have? Gust Monk. Back to Cloud Stance too, by the way. Gust Monk, 2-mana 2/2 Yordle. When I'm summoned, create a Cloud Stance in hand. I like the card. It's okay. I personally like it, but I don't know. I feel like a 2-mana 2/2 just feels kind of bad, and the Recall Synergy deck feels like it wants to be very aggressive, and taking a turn off to create a Cloud Stance and develop a Gust Monk, you're kind of falling behind in tempo against a lot of other tempo-oriented decks. So yeah, I'm not the biggest fan, but generating a card is really nice, so I have to give it some respect, I'd say. I'm gonna give it 3 stars, actually. I think this card's really, really good. In the right deck. You can use it to get a little cute, recalling things like Tail of the Dragon, the thing that comes out of Concussive Palm, recalling Conchologist. I think this is definitely this is a good card for a more slower kind of recall deck than the recall decks we see now, which are very aggressive, playing elusives, playing Ezreals, playing, just very tempo-oriented kind of a recall deck. So yeah, a Yasuo deck maybe. Perhaps not, though. But yeah, I think if you can find a way to get some kind of good value with Cloud Stance, this card is really, really good, and I do love me some value. Anyway, what's next? Oh, everyone's favorite little electric rat, Kennen. There's a lot going on here. So, what does Kennen do? 1 mana, 2/1 quick attack, multi-region card, Ionia, Banal City. When I'm summoned, create a Mark of the Storm in hand. Okay. To level up Kennen, you've summoned the same ally 5+ times this game. So what's Mark of the Storm do? 0 mana fast spell with fleeting. Grant an enemy Mark of the Storm. If they already have it, remove the mark to stun and deal 2 to them. Okay, pretty annoying. What's leveled up Kennen do? Now he's a 3/2, like almost all champions. He gets a +1/+1 buff. Now when he's summoned, blocked, or attacks, you get a Mark of the Storm. And his champion spell is Lightning Rush. 3 mana fast speed spell, recall an ally to deal 2 to anything. Insanely good card. This guy has been putting in some really good work in, most infamously, I'd say, Ezreal Kennen, but we've seen this guy in other decks. We've seen him in Vandal Tree. We've seen him in Shellfolk decks, Kennen Ahri. This guy's all over the place. And he, for good reason. This guy is really annoying. In the right deck, he's really hard to kill. I mentioned Vandal Tree because he's multi-region. He gives you 2 regions for your Vandal Tree to be checked off, specifically mostly Ionia. And the Mark of the Storm's really, really good. In the right deck, he's extremely hard to kill because besides his champion spell, you also have what's it called? Twin Disciplines, recalls in general, because you know you're probably going to be playing Ionia maybe. So yeah, this guy's really, really annoying. The only issue I'd say Kennen has is, and this is not really not that much of an issue, is he kind of struggles to actually win the game by himself. And that's where cards like Ezreal or Vandal Tree or Shellfolk come in. Use Kennen getting some tempo and just screwing around with your opponent's board, stunning them, maybe removing things with the marks, and just being, in general, annoying. And then the win con comes through. So I'm going to give Kennen a whole 5 stars. I think this guy is nuts. While I don't think Kennen himself needs a nerf, I do think cards around Kennen might get nerfed. So, you know, things like Twin Disciplines, Kinku Wayfinder, Eye of the Dragon, possibly. But yeah, this guy's really annoying and very, very strong at the moment. Also, he's a Yordle too, so, you know, if there's even more Yordle synergy in the future, look out, I guess. Next up, what do we have? Ah, yes, we're talking about Lightning Rush itself, Kennen's champion spell. Also really good. 3 mana fast spell, pure Banal City card. Recall an ally to deal 2 to anything. So 3 mana, recall something to Mystic Shot. Okay, so we're paying an extra 1 mana to Mystic Shot something. Sure, it can fizzle if your opponent removes the unit, but it's kind of like Glimpse Beyond. You don't really want to play this proactively. You want to play this reactively, using it to save a unit while killing another unit. I will say this, though. It's a little awkward. 3 mana is kind of a lot. Being able to cast it with only spell mana is really, really nice, though. But yeah, this card is just a little too clunky, if that makes sense. The dream is obviously you like get a phantom block, you recall the card that's blocking, killing something else, and then you replay whatever you recalled, getting more value off of its summon or playability. So that's the dream, but again, like I said, kind of awkward, kind of clunky. But the potential is really high up there. And most importantly, more removal for Banal City. Something they're not the greatest at. Sure, we have things like Mini Morph and what's it called? Pokestick, but just they're not the greatest outside of those. So any kind of decent playable removal, Banal City is happy to get, and this is pretty decent and playable. I'm going to give it 4 stars. I might be overrating this card. I honestly almost gave it 5 stars, but it's just a little too clunky. And it doesn't really go and fit into every single Banal City deck, like other 5-star cards, like, say, I don't know. I think I rated Pokestick 5 stars or something. Maybe. Anyway, next up, Minion. 2 mana, 2/1, multi-region card, Shadow Isles, Banal City. This card has been talked about quite a lot because a lot of people think this card is really strong because of its multi-region stuff with Tristana. I don't think this card is strong at all. Last Breath, create a copy of me in hand at round end. I just said I don't think this card is strong, but I don't think it's unplayable. I think it is a fine card. I think it has a lot of potential is the best way to put it. The problem I feel is that like a lot of cards that would play Minion could just play Hapless Aristocrat instead. Hapless Aristocrat is very similar to Minion. Comes down, clogs up the board, which is what you're using the Minion for. And then it will die to like a Glimpse or a Spirit Leech or whatever you will be using to use for your own self-slay stuff. And that's why I think Minion has a lot of potential. I think it has a lot of potential as just a reusable sacrifice fodder. You have it come down, it then dies and comes back to your hand at the end of the round. You replay it, sacrifice it again, and over and over and over again. Sort of like Lost Soul and I guess Twin Blade for discard. You know, Lost Soul comes down, or Lost Soul's in your hand, you discard it, getting Twin Blade, summon Twin Blade, it dies. You get Lost Soul, you discard it, and then, you know, you've got the infinite value loop going on. Minion, I look at it like that too. The problem is, unlike discard, there's not really that many good payoffs for killing your own units. You might say like, oh, isn't there like Nasus or I think it's Blighted Caretaker, the 2-mana or 3-mana 1/1 that summons 2 saplings if you kill something. Used to be a 2/1 until it got nerfed. And there's like Spirit Leech, and I guess there's like Butcher or something, and Glimpses, but those aren't that great at the moment. But I do like this card in those kind of strategies, so I'm a fan of it. Also for control, it's not the worst for control, but it's fine. The scariest thing about this card, though, is just it's annoying for it's annoying to see it generated from a Banal City Mayor because it's just going to be a 2/1 for Mayor that keeps coming back over and over and over again. So that's going to be annoying. Still, though, 2 stars, though. It has a little potential. I just don't really think any deck at the moment really wants it. And I don't really think it helps out any deck any more than just any... Okay, this is hard to actually vocalize what I'm saying there. I do not think this helps out any deck that would want it that much. Or the decks that would want this, say like a Nasus deck, are just really, really bad and need more help than just Minion. Like Nasus is really bad. Or the champions themselves just suck, like Kindred. Poor Kindred. Next up. Quicken. I love Quicken. 2-mana, fast speed spell, recall a unit with 3 or less power. A little annoying in a world with Sharp Sight and Twin Discipline because you can quicken your own units or your opponent's units. You try to quicken your opponent's units and bounce it, you know, like a Will of Ionia style, and then they just play Sharp Sight or Twin Disciplines, and you're a little sad. Still, though, big fan of this card. I like it as a 1-of or a 2-of in a lot of decks. Wouldn't play 3 of them, especially, like I said, in a Twin Discipline, Sharp Sight meta. We're even seeing Pale Cascade again. So unless maybe if you had ways to shrink units in response, like Scrying Sands or Troll Chant, but yeah, I'm a fan of it though. I'd say though, like I'm a fan of it if 9 out of 10 times you're using it to save your own units. You know, you block and then you recall your own units. Say like recalling Action or recalling Conchologist or something. Also, good card to get off of Conchologist. But yeah, I like the card. Gonna give it a nice solid 3 stars. Very, very average power level, I think. Has a job. Just versatile card, but I wouldn't play too many of them. Kind of does clog up the hand in certain matchups, but it's really, really good and good tempo creator in certain matchups. For example, good things that can recall from your opponent's side. On a non-leveled up Swain, lecturing Yordles, Thresh, all good things. Poppy, an on-curve Poppy getting recalled could be very, very good for you. So I like the card. Definitely I'm trying to fit it into more decks, but I like it as a solid 1 to 2 of in my slower Vandal City control decks. Next up, Resu, or Resu? I have no idea how to pronounce the name. I've been saying Resu. Resu the Silent Storm. 5 mana 1/1. When I'm summoned, summon a Storm Cloud. Stormcloud, as you can see on the left, is a 5-mana 7/3 with impact. Also, I guess Resu is a Yordle. Just quick note. I think the card is bad. I do think there is a little potential here if you can do something with Resu. And I don't mean the entire card, including Stormcloud. I just mean the 5-mana 1/1. If you can somehow do something, whether it's just killing the 5-mana 1/1 or transforming it or something, and you can find a way to do that consistently that doesn't harm your deck too much, I really like this card. Because Stormcloud is not a good card. Stormcloud, 5-mana 7/3, that's not that good. You might say, well, it has impact, sure, but 3 health is very, very low. I've said this multiple times among multiple cards, but it's so easy to just block and trade for a 7/3 by turn 5. The scariest Resu deck I've seen actually is a Concurrent Timelines deck, which it was not that impressive, but it was the most impressive I've seen Resu in. You can also try what Riot probably wants you to do, is like play Resu, recall Resu, play Resu, and keep getting more and more Stormclouds. I feel like if you wanted to do that strategy, there's better things you could be recalling. I mean, like, there's some cute stuff you could do, like Tail Cloak Matriarch Resu, but yeah, it's slow and clunky, and there's better things to do if you wanted to do that style of strategy. Gonna give it 1 star, though. There's a little potential here, but I don't think there's too much that can be done with Resu, in all honesty. Next up, Rumble. Good old Rumble. Lots and lots of text on the guy for not that much, in all honesty. So, what's he do? 4-mana 5/4. Multi-region card, Noxus and Banal City. He's also a Mecha Yordle. Also, we all know now, Mecha Yordles do count for Yordle synergy, so that's nice. When you play Rumble, you can discard up to 3 cards to grant allied Rumbles everywhere. Impact for the first, Quick Attack for the second, Spell Shield for the third. To level him up, Rumble has to have dealt 12 damage. The specific Rumble, that one specific Rumble has to have dealt 12 damage. His champ spell is Flame Spitter. We've already talked about Flame Spitter a bit. Leveled up Rumble, though, 4-mana 6/5. He has all the keywords naturally, so his Spell Shield will refresh if it's removed when he's level 1 and then levels up. When you deal damage to enemy Nexus now, create a random Mecha Yordle in hand, or if you have one, grant all Mecha Yordles in hand +1/+1 and reduce their cost by 1. He's slow. Like, that's the biggest issue, is he is very, very slow. We are not in a slow meta, but if the meta does slow down, I honestly do think Rumble is a good card. Noxus is a good region. Things like Ravenous Flock is great. Arachnoid Sentry. Draven? Like, Draven and Scion really work well with the discard stuff. You can use Lost Souls, of course. But again, the problem is he's just so slow. And while Spell Shield is great, don't get me wrong, Spell Shield is really easy to pop nowadays, in my opinion. You know, Make It Rains, Pokey Stakes, etc., etc. So, I don't know. He's really fun, though. I will say that. It's really nice to get the whole Mecha Yordle thing going, but it's just a little too slow. So I'm going to give him 4 stars, though. He is really fun, really powerful, but he's really slow, and it doesn't do that much when you are far behind, unlike other cards out there. For example, Kennen. Kennen does a lot whether you're ahead or behind. Rumble kind of requires you to be at least on par with your opponent, and if you're behind, you're in trouble. Next up, what do we have? Scrap Heap. In my opinion, one of the better ways to create Mecha Yordles. 1-mana burst speed spell. To play it, discard 1, manifest a Mecha Yordle. Very simple card, but it is a way to burst speed discard, which is nice, so you can use it to get burst speed blockers if you have things like Flame Chompers or Reborn Grenadiers. Being able to create a unit at burst speed is really nice, so you don't have to, pass priority to cast a card. So, big fan of the card. Also, just cheap burst speed ways to discard is really good with things like survival skills, as we've seen the Portal Cannon survival skills thing going. So I'm a big fan of the card. Still, though, 3 stars only. I really just think if there was a little more Banal City discard payoff, I'd really, really like this whole discard Mecha Yordle thing they got going on, but there's just not enough for me. And I know you're obviously meant to pair it off with Noxus because they have the discard payoff like Lost Souls and Fallen Riders and whatever, but just a little bit more would be nice. All right, next up, what do we have? Squeaker. 2-mana 1/1 with Augment. Play, discard 1 to manifest a Mecha Yordle. It's kind of like Spacey Sketcher for Banal City, but it's no Spacey Sketcher. For an extra mana, you're getting Augment, but the pool of cards you're pulling from, I'd say, is not as good. Sure, compared to Spacey Sketcher's Celestial pool, Squeaker's Mecha Yordle pool is, on average, beefier, but also much more expensive and slower. And the Celestials can give you non-units. They can give you spells, things like Equinox, Moon Silver, Moonglow, Crescent Strike, etc., etc. So, I don't know. This is no Spacey Sketcher, but it is an okay comparison. And again, like I said earlier, it's a decent way to get some discard going. Definitely okay on curve in a more discard-oriented deck. The problem is, I feel like you would want to play Squeaker in a discard deck with Banal City. Discard deck with Banal City would probably play Rumble. Rumble wants to come out on turn 4 on curve, discarding 3 cards. Playing Squeaker kind of makes it awkward to have all 3 cards to discard for Rumble without, sacrificing too many good cards. So, I don't know. I'm going to give it 2 stars. I do think it's fine and okay, and one of the better ways to create Mecha Yordles compared to the Yordles that create Mecha Yordles, but I'm not the biggest fan of it. Next up. Oh, this card is awful. Thunderfist. 3-mana 2/3 with impact. When I'm summoned, if you've summoned a Thunderfist this game, transform me into Masa Thundercrasher. Masa Thundercrasher is a 3-mana 5/4 with impact. 2/3 with impact. That's Stone Stackers. So for an extra mana, we have the potential to turn our 3-mana 2/3 or our 3-mana Stone Stackers into a 3-mana 5/4 with impact. I'd rather just play Stone Stackers. Now, obviously, you're going to say, like, well, the deck that plays Stone Stacker wouldn't play Thunderfist, and the deck that plays Thunderfist wouldn't play Stone Stacker. You're obviously meant to use it with recall synergies. Sure. And yeah, like Retreat Return. I think those are the cards. The 2-mana recall card that makes the 1-mana summon a 3-mana card at burst speed is pretty good. But yeah, even that combo, it's like I'd rather just like summon a Shadow Assassin or something else. So yeah, I don't know. That's a lot of work. You got to get 2 Thunderfists out there, and that is a lot of work, and you're not getting too much. And while a 5/4 is a big ball of stats for a 3-drop, it's not that great. And while impact's annoying, it's not that hard to chump block a 5/4. So I'm not the biggest fan of this card. I think there's just so many better things you could do. Like what deck wants this? Aggressive or mid-range decks? I feel like they could just be doing better things than Masa. I feel like this is just meant for Expedition, recall decks in all honesty. So gonna give it 1 stars. Maybe if you really, really need something in a 3-mana slot, I could see you playing this, but I'm not a big fan of it. I'd rather, honestly, most of the time just bank that 3 spell mana, or bank that 3 mana and turn it into spell mana. What do we have next? Tornado Warrior. I like this card. 2-mana 2/2. When I'm summoned, grant me +1/+0 and a random keyword. I keep those stat buffs and keywords when I'm recalled. So initially, it's a 2-mana 3/2 that when you summon it has a random keyword. That alone is almost playable. I wouldn't play a 2-mana 3/2 that said when you summon me, I get a random keyword. But that's very borderline playable. Decent at blocking fearsomes, but this kind of card is not a fearsome blocker. The issue I have with this card is, what deck wants to play this? That's a lot of tempo losses to recall this card, And you might say, okay, so you're taking a lot of tempo losses. How about a slower, more controlling deck? Yeah, but it's not a good blocker. And if you're a more controlling deck, you want to be blocking. This card is not blocking well. This card wants to be attacking, it feels. Like, I feel like this card wants to attack, and then you use, your opponent uses a removal spell, and in response to the removal spell, you try to recall it. Still, though, it can snowball really hard, and I think you could build around it. I just am not the biggest, I don't know, I don't have a lot of hope for it, but I do think it does have strength and potential, and the snowballing effect is really good if you can keep it safe. It can become a win con all on its own. I'm going to give it 3 stars. 2 mana is really easy, really cheap to keep replaying over and over. Still, though, you just might get outraced unless you get really lucky with the keywords. That's another reason I'm not the biggest fan of it. Just randomness is always painful when you want consistency. Next up, what do we have? Ah, the Yordle Captain. This guy. 4 mana, 4/4. He's a Yordle as well, of course, if you couldn't guess. When you summon another ally with equal or less power than me, grant it +1/+1. I love this card. I think this card is nuts. I'm surprised more and more people aren't playing this card, but I love this card. 4 health is pretty tough to get rid of on turn 4. Not the most difficult because you have things like Ravenous Flock. I'd rather it be a 3/5. What's his name? Lecturing Yordle, but then it would whiff on certain cards I would like to see it get buff, like Senna, Shell Folks, Radiant Guardians, etc., etc. But yeah, I really like this card. Really nice in things like Darkness to buff Senna, like I said earlier. Poppy Lux Shell Folk to buff Shell Folks, buffing Radiant Guardians. Just a really good card. And it's a good removal magnet. Your opponent will see this and they might throw like 2 removal spells. Like I've had people throw 3 removal spells at this card trying to get rid of it. And that just makes your upcoming units all the more safer. So, your Vagars, your Sennas, your Shell Folks, your Luxes, etc., etc. So I love this card. Must answer kind of card that if it does get answered, it absorbs some removal, making your other cards a little safer. And if it doesn't get answered, then you just get to get some free buffs. So I'm going to give it a whole 5 stars. Next up, though. Can I just say what I said for the last guy, for the Yordle Captain for this one? Yordle Explorer, 2 mana, 2/2. It's a Yordle. When you summon another Yordle, grant it +1/+1. Pretty much exactly what I said for the Yordle Captain. Comes down earlier than Yordle Captain too, so it's even harder to remove early on outside of maybe Mystic Shots and Avalanche, I guess. But yeah, really tough to answer this guy early on curve if they have it. And then your opponent might have the Yordle Explorer into Yordle Explorer curve, which is really annoying because the second Yordle Explorer then has 3 health, and you still need to get rid of them, or else that's a +2/+2 buff for every Yordle. And again, like I said, with Yordle Captain, absorbs removal, making your other units safer, your Poppies, Vagars, etc., etc. Everyone was like, oh, well, we saw Battlesmith, and Battlesmith was pretty much this card, but for elites. Yeah, but elites suck. And there aren't as many elites that are good by themselves, unlike, say, Yordles, which there's a lot of Yordles that are already just good by themselves, and putting a buff on them makes them that much better. And again, I keep saying it, removal magnets, removal sponges, whatever you want to call cards like Yordle Captain, Yordle Explorer, are really, really good because they absorb the removal, because your opponent will want to kill these, because if they don't, then your opponent might just lose because of the value the Explorers and Captains give you. And if they do remove it, that just means your other cards are that much safer. Like I said, Poppies, Banal City Mayors, etc., etc. So I think you can guess what I'm going to give this guy. He's getting a whole 5 stars. This card is nuts. Crazy good. I can't believe he's a 2/2 for 2. I really feel like he should be at 1 health or something, or maybe a 1/2 or whatever. This guy is so good. And then to top it off, he's also a Yordle. So if there's ever more Yordle synergy, he gets it too. Anyway, that's it for Banal City. We got 2 more regions. We got Ionia and Targon. Let's head over to Ionia really quick. And first up in Ionia, we have Ahri, one of the new champions. Pretty good card too, Ahri is. 2 mana, 2/3 with quick attack. When she attacks, first time she attack strikes, swap me with the ally to my right, then recall that ally. To level up Ahri, you have to have recalled 6 units this game. So what does Ahri do when she levels up? Well, first off, it's +1/+1 like most champions. She gains the elusive keyword, very annoying keyword to gain. Now though, when she attacks, she keeps swapping. She will not stop. The first time, when she's level 1, she only does it the first time. Now, every time she attacks strikes, she will swap with the ally on the right if there is one. Also, now, when you, not Ahri, but just you as a player, recall an ally, its cost gets reduced by 1. And cost reduction is very scary. And then to top it all off, she has a great champion spell. Charm. Ahri's Charm. 2 mana focus speed spell. Recall an ally to give an enemy vulnerable this round. I really like Charm too. Kind of like Sonic Wave from Lee Sin as well. And Sonic Wave's a pretty solid card, as we all know by now. So yeah, I'm a big fan of Ahri. Elusive, when she levels up, lets her just become a win con on her own. 3 health on a 2-drop, insanely good. Being able to dodge a lot of common removal for smaller units, you know, things like Mystic Shots and Avalanches. You're obviously going to be an Ionia too, so even if your opponent does have removal, you know you're playing things like Twin Disciplines, Recalls, Nopifies, Denies, you know, the standard Ionia annoying stuff. So yeah, big fan of Ahri. I don't even think she's just meant as a more tempo style card. I do think she can even work in control, using Ahri to recall units that are a little slower but have good summon effects, you know, things like Shadow Assassin, Conchologist, Telescope, etc., etc. Aloof Travelers even. So yeah, big fan of Ahri, lots of potential with her, big fan of this card. Whole 5 stars from me. Good level 1, great level 2, and a great champion spell. What do we have next? Just her champion spell itself, Charm. So we know what Charm already does. And like I said, I like it. The only thing about Charm by itself is I feel like you need to do something with that recall. In other words, you need to care about the recall. You can't look at the recall as a downside. So you have to turn the downside of recalling an ally into an upside. So, you know, you got to recall something that has a strong playability like Conchologist, or something that wants to be recalled like Tail of the Dragon to turn it into a Concussive Palm, or a Dancing Droplet. Because if you're not, I'd much rather just play Sonic Wave, because, you know, Sonic Wave gives you that second spell, and you can use that second spell to activate your Eye of the Dragon as well, which you're most likely playing because you're Ionia. Still, though, I like the card. I think it's very strong, but I do think if you're not really making use of the recall and taking advantage of the recall, you're better off playing Sonic Wave. So I'm going to give it 2 stars, though. Love the art, though, by the way. But yeah, 2 stars for me. What do we have next? Yeah, Children of the Forest. A lot of these cards in Ionia are kind of bad, in all honesty. Speaking of bad, Children of the Forest. 8 mana slow spell. Summon ephemeral copies of the 3 strongest followers you've recalled this game. Doesn't say they have to be allied, so it can summon your opponent's stuff, which is cool. I don't know what this card is trying to do. Like, is it supposed to be like a harrowing for recall decks, I think? But why would you ever play this in a recall deck? I'm not sure. The only time I think this card is just unplayable and it's just bad. The only time I think you will ever see this is if you get it generated randomly from some kind of random generated card, like, you know, Flash of Brilliance or Loping Telescope. Because I don't think you should ever put this card in your deck. Like, Harrowing's strong because it completely fills up your board when it's empty. This, it doesn't do much. I guess you could argue, well, you can summon the 3 strongest followers and then you could recall them to remove the ephemeral, but that's a lot of mana and really slow for not much of a payoff. So yeah, I'm gonna give it 0 stars, sorry. Now the next card, though, from 0 stars to this thing, God Willow Seedling. 3 mana landmark, play the card, play landmark, recall an ally to summon an ephemeral copy of it. So you get the summon ability, count down 2, summon another ephemeral copy of it. So you're getting basically 3 copies of whatever you're recalling. You get the first ephemeral copy, second ephemeral copy, and then you recalled it so you can replay it again. So that's like 3 units. You're getting to play that unit 3 times. 4 times if you include the time you first played it before you played God Willow Seedling. Card is nuts. Yeah, and also because you're most likely in a recall deck, you can recall the ephemeral copies to remove the ephemeral and basically have created a new copy of that card, which could also be a champion. So, you know, Kennen, basically. Card's insane. I don't know. Creates so much value for very, very cheap amount of mana. This is basically what Monastery of Harana wishes it was. So yeah, I don't really know. I feel like most of you know what this card is about. It's just so versatile. So yeah, crazy card. 5 stars here. It's got it all. The only downside, and it's not much of a downside, is it does need you to have a unit on the field, which is like, wow, streamer. You need to have a unit on the field. You need to have a unit on the field. You want a God Willow, I guess, which sometimes you don't. Sometimes it'll just clog up your hand and you're like, I wish I had a Shadow Assassin on the field or something. But yeah. Also, if you time it correctly, it will give you a pseudo burst speed blocker, because if you time it correctly for the unit to pop out of the God Willow Seedling, you will get it will turn into a blocker. So before your opponent open attacks, you'll have the blocker. So that's cute. Next up, what do we have? Memory's Cloak. I think this card is bad. I like the card, but I think it's bad. 3 mana fast spell. Pick an ally being targeted by enemy fast spells, slow spells, or skills with only 1 target. Stop them. Yeah, so between Notify and Deny, I'd rather just play more Notifies than Denies before I play Memory's Cloak. Like, I don't know. For 1 extra mana, I could just play Deny. And Deny doesn't have these kind of conditions. And you can't even argue, well, this hits skills. Deny also hits skills. So, I don't know. Maybe in like a Lee Sin deck, but I don't think so. I'd rather, again, just play Notify or Deny. Powerful spell to get off of Conchologist, I guess, but still, I'm not the biggest fan of this over the current counterspell magic that Ionia has. And I'll be honest with you, I'm not that sad to see that Ionia counterspell magic is not that good, or the new ones are not that good, because their current counterspell magic is pretty good. Gonna give it 2 stars. I do think there might be some niche scenarios where Memory's Cloak is really good. Like I think like maybe some kind of weird like tempo-oriented deck that is gonna struggle to have all 4 mana for Deny, because you can cast Memory's Cloak with only spell mana, and it would rather use Memory's Cloak to protect something like Zed over using Notify, but that's kind of weird, so I'm not the biggest fan of it. Next up. Oh, this card. 9 lives. 5 mana burst speed spell. Summon a Liminal Guardian. Liminal Guardian is a 5 mana 3/2 with a lot of text on it. So, when Liminal Guardian is summoned, summon a random 1-cost follower from your regions. You might low roll and get like Shadow Fiend or something too, so be careful. When I'm recalled, transform me into 9 lives. Similar to Concussive Palm and Tail of the Dragon. I don't like this card. I feel like if you were trying to do this whole... I feel like if you want to play 9 lives, you need to be doing like... You need to be summoning 9 lives, and you need to be recalling Liminal Guardian. The problem is then you have to play 9 lives again. That's another 5 mana. That's a lot of mana. And what's the payoff? You're getting some 1-cost. Like some random 1-cost. That's cool. And you might say, well, it's a burst speed blocker, streamer. Yeah, but I'd rather just play Concussive Palm. Like, sure, Concussive Palm doesn't give you a blocker at burst speed, but it does stun a unit. And I think it's just more versatile anyway. Plus, it pops Spell Shield too, unlike this card. So, not a fan of this card. If it had maybe like 1 more point of health, or the Liminal Guardian had like some kind of keyword like elusive or lifesteal or I don't even know, something like tough, maybe. But I just 5 mana for a 3/2 and a 1-drop, which sure they're good 1-drops, but I'm not the biggest fan of it. So yeah, I don't know. Not a fan of this. I feel like if there is a deck that could keep recalling Liminal Guardian, I'd rather just recall almost anything else, like Dancing Droplet for card draw, Concussive Palm if I want to slow my opponent down, etc., etc. So I'm going to give this thing 0 stars. I just think there are better options if you want to do the whole summon something, recall something, summon something, recall, keep playing it over and over and over and looping it. Next up, Pathless Ancient. 4 mana 4/3, costs 2 less if you've recalled a unit this round. So it's a 4 mana 4/3 with no extra text. I mean, it can cost 2 mana, but that's it. No keyword, no like tribe, like it's not a Yordle or anything. So that's it. I still think it's good, or at least slightly playable. I do not think it's good enough now, but as we've seen from Banal City, going wide quickly is a strong strategy, and if you can consistently get this thing active and make it cost 2 often enough, it does let you go wide fairly quickly, and 4/3 for 2 is a pretty good stat line. It's not the greatest, but it's okay. But I don't know, I'm not the biggest fan of it. Not much to talk about. It's a little clunky, hard to activate, and the payoff's not amazing. But there's a little potential, so I'm going to give it 1 star. I think it's definitely better than 9 lives. Freaking 9 lives. Next up, Seinen. Seinen Thousand Tailed. 6 mana 3/5. When I'm summoned, draw 2. Give all other allies +1/+1 this round. I like this card. Now, granted, it is a card that says, like, when you summon me, draw some cards. You know, how could I not like this card? I love cards that draw cards. I honestly think this card is really good and a little underrated at the moment. Now, what deck would want to play this is the problem. I don't know which deck wants to play this. But I do think this deck, or this card, is really, really nice in a weird, like, mid-range deck, like a mid-range recall deck. Lets you keep just grinding. It lets you turn into, like, a weird grinding deck in the late game. You play this, you recall it. Giving other allies +1/+1 for the round can be very annoying. You know, you give +1/+1 to some challengers or maybe some elusives to try and get some nice trades or some nice blocks. And you've got 2 more cards to be drawn. And a 3/5, it's kind of hard to remove too. So I like the card. I've already seen it getting played a little bit in, say, Lulu Jinx, which is not a new deck. It's a fairly off-meta deck, but we see it. But Seinen is very annoying for that. In that deck, I've noticed using this with Flame Chompers is really annoying too. So I think there is some potential, especially if the meta slows down. That's the biggest issue. I'm going to say, I've been saying this a lot. Meta is super, super fast. But if the meta slows down, I could see like some Seinen decks floating around. Gonna give it 3 stars. I think it has a lot of potential behind it. It's a very powerful card in a vacuum. I think it's a very good card. It just needs a home. And yeah, I like the card a lot. Next up though, the Mourned. Very easy card to understand here. 1 mana 2, 1 elusive. Nexus Strike, recall me. So, Navori Blade Scout. 1 mana 2, 1. When it's summoned, it gets elusive for the turn. I'd rather play Navori Blade Scout all the time, almost all the time, over the Mourned. The only reason I'm playing the Mourned is I care about recall. And recall does seem to be decent enough that there are decks that I would rather play the Mourned over Navori Blade Scout. And unlike the Blade Scout, it does permanently have elusive, so you could play the Mourned on your opponent's turn and set up, you know, a nice open attack. You know, your opponent's like, oh, yeah, just do something on my turn. Now it's your turn. And before you start your turn, you play like a couple of Mourns. That's like 4 elusive damage right there. So I like the card. Very big fan of it. Cheap elusives are very annoying. So yeah, gonna give it a whole 3 stars. What do we have next, though? Oh, this card. this card is definitely a thing. Windsinger. 6 mana 4/3 play ability. Recall unit. So it is an ability. It's a play ability. Your opponent can interact with it. They can deny it. They could, I guess they could also Memories Cloak it, but yeah, Memories Cloak. I'd rather just play Will of Ionia or Concussive Palm over this card. Like, sure, it's a 4/3, but you're trading for an extra 2 mana compared to Will of Ionia. You're trading off the fast speed for a 4/3. And you might say, well, it can recall your own units. So can Will of Ionia. Well, you can recall the Windsinger and replay it. Yeah, that's 6 mana, though. That's a big tempo loss. Like, sure, it's recalling and bouncing an enemy unit, but you're still spending 6 mana for that, and it's not a good stat line. And obviously, it's not meant to be a good stat line. It's got Will of Ionia on it. It's Will of Ionia on a stick. I just, like, if the stat line was reversed, it was a 3/4, maybe I'd like it a little bit more. But 4/3, I'm not a big fan of. Gonna give it 0 stars. I'm not a fan of this card at all. I like this style of card, though, like, you know, powerful abilities on a card. But yeah, maybe if it wasn't a play ability, it was just, you know, it just came down and happened instead of like letting your opponent counter it, because that would first off let it go through spell shields as well, which would be really sick. And your opponent wouldn't be able to interact with this. So yeah, I'm not a big fan of this. Next up, though, last card I think for Ionia. Woodland Keeper. 3 mana, 3/2. When I'm summoned, give me +1/+0 and elusive this round. We mentioned it a little earlier, Navori Blade Scout. We're basically playing an extra 2 mana for a bigger Navori Blade Scout. While I don't think that's great, I'd rather just play Navori Blade Scout. I could see this as like the 4th copy of Navori Blade Scout, or maybe you play like 3 Navori Blade Scouts, 3 Woodland Keepers, 3 Morns, and just do some degenerate, elusive strategy here, and then throw in some recalls, and then you recall like the Blade Scouts or the Woodland Keepers to refresh their elusives. And yes, it is more mana, but you are getting something for that extra mana, and you are getting an extra 2 elusive damage. You know, it's a 4/2. And it avoids pings too, unlike Navori Blade Scout, who can just get pinged down with things like Pokestick or Make It Rain. So I'm not the biggest fan of it, but I can see the potential with this card. I'm only giving it 1 star. I'm probably underrating this in all honesty. It should probably be maybe 2 stars, but I'm going to give it 1 star for now. Anyway, though. Next up, last region. Good old Targon. Arguably one of my favorite regions. And first off, we got a pretty bad card here. We got Against the Odds. 3 mana focus speed spell. If your opponent has more units than you, grant an ally +1/+1 for each extra unit they have. So, I've seen some people say this card is good. It stops swarm decks. First off, it doesn't stop swarm decks. The only reason it will stop a swarm deck is if you have like a lifesteal unit and then you play Against the Odds. That's kind of meh. There's not that many units in Targon that have lifesteal permanently. Solaris Sunforger doesn't count. I was going to say like, oh, maybe Sparklefly, but it got nerfed, and I'm not playing Fangs. Fangs kind of sucks right now. Fangs is super slow. Sure, I guess you could be like, oh, you can arguably turn 1 pass, turn 2 pass, have 3 mana banked, and then on turn 3 you play Sparklefly, and then Against the Odds. I don't like this card. But I have seen some people say this is like standalone for Targon. No, it is not. And I've seen, but they've been saying like it's the unnerfed version of standalone, and standalone used to cost 3 mana. The problem is the spell speeds. Standalone is great even at 4 mana because of the burst speed. You can use it as a combat trick. Your opponent's like, I use Mystic Shot, or I'll block the unit. And you're like, oh, that's cool. Standalone in response. Now I get a great trade. Against the Odds, focus speed is great. Don't get me wrong, that is a great spell speed. But it can't be used during combat, so you can't be like, oh, my opponent's playing Mystic Shot. Let me Against the Odds real quick. Oh, wait, it's focus speed. I can't do that. So, I don't know. I'm not a big fan of it. Maybe in the future, Fiora gets unnerfed and becomes a 3/3 again, and we can try to do some kind of like Fiora Zoe Targon nonsense. But for now, I don't think this card's good. I can see a little potential, though, because it is 3 mana, so it can be cast with only spell mana, so you can do some weird turn 1 pass, turn 2 pass, turn 3 something. I just don't think there's that many good 3 drops to make really big with Against the Odds. And plus, it relies on your opponent playing units, and some decks will not be swarming that hard. I guess it is a good spell to get off of Conchologist, though. So gonna give it 1 star, though. I can see a little potential, but I'm not the biggest fan of this. Oh, now this card, though. Blinded Mystic. Love this card. 4 mana, 3/2. Play the card, grant an ally +1/+1, and silence an enemy follower. So you don't have to buff something to get the silence. You can just play this and have no units on the field to silence something. If you have to do that, you're in a bad spot, in my opinion, but you can if you have to, and sometimes you got to do things like that. Really nice, activates Faded as well, and the silence does go through Spell Shield because it's not a ability, it's just a play ability, which sounds weird to say, but it is. It's not a skill, in other words, and play abilities that are not skills don't get stopped by Spell Shield. But yeah, a Equinox, basically on a stick, that buffs other units. A 4 mana 4/3 of stats, which, while it's not great, is okay. The Mystic herself, can block Fear Stones, which is nice. You can use the buff to buff things that are faded if you want to, or buff things that really like buffs, like Zoe's, or things that have lifesteal. For I don't know why, you might be playing Fangs or something. But yeah, great card. This card can just win games against certain decks, being able to burst speed silence against a Shellfolk or a Screeching Dragon, or I don't even know, like a Leviathan is just so nuts. I do think, though, it's a little meta dependent, and I think you can't just slam 3 of these in your target decks. You need to analyze the meta and say how many good silence targets are there in the meta, etc., and how often do I want to silence them, and would I rather just do this or play Spacey Sketchers and maybe Zoe's and try and find Equinoxes instead. Still, though, I think it's worth 5 stars. I think this card is really good, really powerful, especially if the meta is in the right set for it. If you are in a good meta for this card, it's really powerful. Even if you're not in a good meta for Blinded Mystic, I still think it's a great card that you should consider playing because, like I keep saying, activates Faded. Buffing smaller units or units that have good keywords, you just want to see what buffs, like, elusives, lifesteals, Zoe's. Anyway, next up. Oh, from a great card to a bad card, Cam for the Doubt. 6 mana, 5/4. Terrible stat line. When I'm summoned, if you've targeted allies 6+ times this game, grant me Spell Shield, Overwhelm, and Challenger. Kind of sad this card kind of sucks, in all honesty, because it has a beautiful animation when you summon it. But yeah, that's a lot it's asking you to do. Obviously, it's meant for a faded deck, but I just think it's a lot. And while it's not hard to target allies 6 times over the course of a game, the payoff's not the greatest. And 4 health is not amazing. And it is expensive. Maybe if it was like swapped. This is the case with a lot of cards. If the health was swapped, the stats were swapped, and it was a 4/5, I'd like it a lot more, but 4 health is just so little health for a 6-drop. So easy to kill. Spell Shield is nice, though. So, it can just not immediately die the turn it gets summoned. Your opponent will have to have something like a Pokey Stick, but still, it's so much mana for not that much of a payoff. So 0 stars for me. I'd rather, if I'm trying to find like some 6 mana or expensive, like, I don't even know what I can call this. Not a game ender, but it's just like some beefy mid-game unit. I'd rather just play a lot of other stuff. I don't know. I'd rather play like Star Shaping or something. I don't know. I just think there's better things you can do, even in just Target alone. Next up, we've got another bad card. Freed Colossus. 5 mana, 4/5. When I'm summoned or attacked, create a gem in hand. Lots of analogies were drawn to Lecturing Yordle with this card. This is no Lecturing Yordle. Gems are much worse than the poison darts. Sure, the gems aren't fleeting like the poison darts are, but that's not that much of an upside. You usually just use the poison darts right away anyway. It's like, sure, I guess you could argue, like, if they weren't fleeting, you could stack them up and then eventually, like, use 5 poison darts in one turn to kill a big unit, but it's just, I don't know. You're paying an extra mana and you're not getting that many more stats. And again, the gems aren't great. Sure, I guess like it helps activate Faded, but I'd rather just play Mountain Goat if I want gems. Like, it's just so slow. The stat line's not great. Maybe if it had a keyword. If it had a keyword of some kind, I'd really, really like this card. Like if it had tough, or if it had just anything really, but by itself, I'm not a fan of it. Yeah. So I'm gonna give this thing 0 stars. I really don't like this card. I think it's really, really bad. Next up, Eula. I have no idea how to pronounce her name, but I keep saying Eula, and no one's gotten mad at me yet, so I'm gonna keep saying Eula. 3-mana, 3/3. Play. Give an ally spell shield and overwhelm this round. I like this ability. I don't think it's great, but I like it. Most of the time I'd rather just play Zenith Blade if I want to give something overwhelm, because first off, it's permanent. But I do like this in the right decks. One, it activates Faded. I'm gonna say that a lot, I feel. And two, it's like it does give you spell shield for the round, so you can use it in certain decks to, you know, when you're trying to OTK someone, Lee Sin or the Wounded White Flame, which we'll talk about a little bit more later. So it's nice. Getting Spell Shield Overwhelm for that turn is nice. Helping just to activate Faded is good. So it's a nice card, but it just feels a little awkward. Like, you don't want to summon on 3, I think, is the issue. So I'm going to give it 2 stars. Like, a 3-mana 3/3 is fine, but it just feels like it's just fine. Like, that's the problem. It's not like I look at this card and I'm like, wow, that card's busted. I don't, it's like, look at this card and then, like, I don't know, look at Yordle Explorer as an example. Yordle Explorer, you look at it and like, you're like, wow, that card's crazy. You look at Eula and you're just like, meh, she's okay. It's not bad. But yeah, I don't know. I'm not a big fan of her. Next up, though, we got Pantheon. Big boy here. 4-mana 4/2. Overwhelm, Barrier, and Faded. To level up Pantheon, you have to have targeted allies in 5 different rounds. So there's where Eula helps. When Pantheon levels or is summoned, he gets a random keyword for each round you've targeted allies this game. And his champion spell is Shield Vault, which is a 2-mana slow speed spell. Grant an ally +1/+1 and stun an enemy. Not a great spell, but okay spell. Anyway, Pantheon. Low health for a 4-drop. 2 health is kind of meh. Obviously, though, you are going to play him in a deck that has ways to activate Faded. So think Pale Cascades, Guiding Touches, Sharp Sights, Troll Chance, Bright Steel Protector, Chain Vest, etc., etc. So it's, while he does have only 2 health, and that is very, very low, he's surprisingly durable, not because of himself, but because of the spells in his decks. And then level up Pantheon is very, very RNG. Sometimes you can just low roll and get nothing great. Like, sure, you're getting 5 keywords at minimum. And I think the math was that you have a 40% chance of getting a certain keyword, which I'm not sure, but I was told that. I have no idea how accurate that is. And it's like a good chance you're going to get a certain keyword, but you're going to have those games where you're like, okay, I really need Lifesteal, or okay, I really would love Challenger, or I'd love some Elusive now, and you get like Impact or something, and you're like, or Augment, and you're like, well, that's useless. That's just a low roll. Also, a very cute thing you can do, similar to Arsenal, you can use Hourglass to Hourglass Pantheon and double the keywords up, which is very cute. Not that great though, but it's cute. So yeah, I like Pantheon. Very fun champ. Definitely a mid-range champ. I don't think you should try too hard to level him up. Just, I've seen some people just throw in spells randomly and throw in abilities randomly on their units just to get progress towards a Pantheon level up. I don't know if that's correct. I don't feel like it's correct, but every game's different. So 4 stars from me. And that lack of a 5th star is really just the RNG from the keywords. And his champ spell. His champ spell is not that good. It's not the worst, but it's not that great. If he had a better champ spell, I would give him 5 stars, but I don't like Shield Vault. And really, mostly it's just that the RNG from a leveled up Pantheon can just screw you and make it so it's like, well, I just lose here because I didn't get the right keyword. Next up, though, what do we have? Saga Seeker. I like this card. 1 mana, 1/2, faded. That's it. Very simple card here, but I think this card's really good. Really nice in the Pantheon decks. Also just nice in Targon in general. Targon kind of was struggling in the 1-drop department. Sure, they had Zoe, but she's a champion, so you couldn't play her in every deck. There was like Spacey Sketcher and stuff, but you kind of needed discard fodder for that. Targon, let me put it this way. Targon struggles so much in the 1-drop department that you would see people playing Lunari Duskbringer and they had no Nightfall units. They would just play it as a 1-mana 2/1, and just the Dusk Petal Dusk was useless. Maybe it could be used for discard fodder for a Spacey Sketcher, but it was mostly just played as a 1-mana 2/1 because they needed that. And you might say, why not play Gift Giver? And 2/1's better than 1/2, in all honesty. 2/1 actually trades with things. But yeah, I like Saga Seeker. Really nice in decks with Pale Cascade, Guiding Touches. Could turn into a win con by itself if you give it Overwhelm with Zenith Blade. Love this card. It is a little bad in the late game when you're trying to top deck a very powerful, high impact card, and you're just like, okay, I need a very strong card here. Like, give me a Golden Aegis, give me a Star Shaping, give me something, and you top deck this card, you're a little sad. So that's gonna keep me from giving him 5 stars. He only gets 4 stars from me. Very good card on turn 1. And like the early turns, like turn 1 through, I'd say even as late as 4. But after turn 4, it's kind of a bad card to draw, in all honesty. Next up, though. Shield Vault. I said this was a bad card. Well, let me rephrase that. I think I said I do not like this card. And it's true. I don't like this card. 2 mana slow spell, grant an ally +1/+1, and stun an enemy. Yeah. So here's the thing. In Targon, you have Solari Sunhawk. I'd much rather play Solari Sunhawk if I want to stun for 2 mana in Targon. I will say this, though. I don't think it's unplayable in the right meta. I do think if you're in a meta where you want to have a stun, you could consider playing this card. Because outside of Solari Sunhawk, I think there are other ways to stun, but they kind of suck, like Sneaky Zeebles, or they're conditional and need something else with them, like Ground Slam. Ground Slam it's the Malphite champ spell. I think it only stuns an enemy unless you have summoned a landmark that game, in which case it turns into stun enemy and then deal 3 to it. But yeah, I'd rather just play Sunhawk almost all the time, but I will play this if I am in a deck that has faded, or if I guess there's a popular deck, and I guess my Sunhawk, because if I remember correctly, Solari Sunhawk, it stuns, I believe, the strongest enemy, and I don't know, maybe there would be something you want to stun that's not the strongest enemy, like, I don't know, a Teemo or something, Zoe, whatever. In other words, Shield Vault lets you target. Solari Sunhawk doesn't let you target. But even then, I'd rather play Solari Sunhawk. So though all of that said, I still think it's a fine card in the right meta, but I'm not the biggest fan of it. I give it 2 stars. It's very niche. And it's okay in Faded, but outside of Faded decks, I'd rather just play Sunhawk. Next up, though, We Stand Together. 3 mana burst speed spell. Give 2 allies +1/+2 this round. Decent combat trick. Pretty good for Faded. I just feel, I don't know, almost every region has a good 2 mana combat trick. You know, Twin Discipline, Sharp Sights, Troll Chance, etc., right? I feel like I don't think this card's unplayable. I do think this card is a fine card if you need more combat tricks, and it's pretty good in Faded as well. So like I like this in like Zoe Pantheon because it helps protect Zoe too. You use this to protect Zoe and then get a Faded trigger as well. That's pretty sweet. But I feel like your secondary region should be helping to cover you if you need more combat tricks. Now, granted, you could play this, Hail Cascade, Guiding Touch, and your secondary region's combat tricks. Like, you could play Sharp Sight, Hail Cascade, Guiding Touch, and We Stand Together. That's a lot of combat tricks, though, and then you're getting into the problem of, do I have enough units to justify all these combat tricks, or what? So, I like it, though. I think it's a solid card. I could see it as, like, a solid, like, 2 of in most decks, but I don't know, I'm not the biggest fan of it. I'm gonna give it 3 stars. It's fine. It's kind of boring, and it's nothing special, but it does have some blowout moments, and especially it works well with the Fated keyword. Speaking of the Fated keyword, I love how there's only 3 units with Fated, I believe. Here's another one. Wounded White Flame. Great card. 3 mana, 2/4. Fury Fated. Very simple card. It's also a dragon, so dragon decks like it. Card's great. Card is nuts. This card grows so easily. So it starts off really, really big because it's a 2/4 for 3, which is a decent stat line. And then you can buff it really easily and buff it really quickly thanks to Fated, and it's going to be really hard for your opponent to kill thanks to Fury as well. If your opponent tries to start chomping it down, it'll get +1/+1 every time it gets victory in combat. And then you give it Zenith Blade, or maybe even use Eula to give it Overwhelm. Get a lot of mileage out of this card. We've been seeing some people doing this already with Lee Sin, playing this in a Lee Sin deck as like sort of a backup win con behind like a secondary backup. Like Zoe level up was already a backup. Now you have Wounded White Flame as another backup alongside other backups like Scattered Pods and Solari Priestess are also other cards that sometimes get played as backup game plans, backup win cons. So yeah, pretty good card. I really, really like it. Very tough to deal with. I've talked about it a lot. It's good removal magnet too. For the Lee Sin deck, your opponent wastes a lot of removal on this, then you drop a Lee Sin, and it's easy game for you. So, and outside of Lee Sin, it's pretty decent in Dragons too. Great in Fated decks with Pantheon and Taric. Just an overall great card, solid card for Targon. Easily 5 stars for me. I think this card is great. It's been a while since Targon's gotten a very, very strong card like this, unless you count, like, I don't know, Loping Telescope, I guess. But that's like a Banal City Targon card. But yeah, very strong card for Targon. They have been suffering and have been needing some strong cards. And this is one of them. So, that is it for all the new cards. That is all, I believe, 43 of the new cards in the set, Magic Misadventures. And those are all my ratings for the new cards. Hope you enjoyed them. I would love to hear your opinions on my ratings. Maybe you agree, maybe you disagree, maybe there's something you would love to bring up that I might have missed. Maybe there's something like, I don't know, maybe you think I gave a hard time to Rumble or something, and you think Rumble's a lot better than I'm giving him credit for. Same with the Mecha Yordles. Or maybe you think I'm giving, I don't know, Kennen too much credit, even though I think Kennen's really strong. I'd love to hear your opinions down below in the comment section. So, you know, tear into me or whatever you want to do. If you guys just enjoyed the video, you know, you learned something, maybe got an idea of how to build a deck or something, or you just enjoy the video in general, I'd love it if you could leave a like or a comment down below. Always helps me out and all that. You know how it is. And if you guys want to keep up with the Legends of Runeterra content, you can always go and subscribe to the channel. Also, if you want to watch me play some Legends of Runeterra, you can always go and check me out over on Twitch at twitch.tv/Zenaton, where I stream pretty much every single day. Been playing a lot of the game too recently because of the new set. Anyway, with that all said and done, thank you all again once more for watching, and until I see you guys in the next video, bye!